Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to our podcast. This is a podcast, Brian, where we have a show where we talk about the news in clean energy every week because we are clean energy nerds. We're excited by this. We follow this stuff and yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, we've been doing this now for 33 episodes and I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
I can barely get up in the morning.
News that's going on, and you know, I don't even like to say the T word.
What's the T word?
But I don't like to say it.
Okay, don't say it then.
I just want the American election to be over. We don't even live in that country.
Brian, what's the T word? I don't understand what the T word is.
I don't want to say it. The T word.
Spell it for me then.
No, it has to do with the American election.
Oh, that T word. Okay. Yeah, that's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. The amount of news stories piling up. When we began this podcast, it was such a simpler world.
Yes. Oh, wasn't it though?
And now we just can't escape. The intention was never to talk about news events, and but what's going on is it's crazy.
It is crazy. Do you try not to follow this stuff, or how do you deal with it?
I do try. Well, I don't know. I sort of try not to follow it. If anything, I enjoy consuming it through, the late night American comedy, television shows. It's a way to keep informed about it and have a laugh at the same time.
All right. Well, coming up with this show, I'm going to talk a little bit about the throne speech in Canada, which is the first in North America to sort of address stuff. So I just want to get into that a little bit again. I'm going to follow up on some more political things with our friend, because we're coming to you from oil country. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the crazy things, because it affects us. I'm really worried about it. And I have family members in the oil industry, so it sort of affects me, and I'm sort of wondering about how people sort of deal with this. We're going to talk about how a steelmaker that has a plant 2 miles away from me is going to renewable in the States in one of their plants, which is shocking to me because I don't associate that smokestack over there with anything good, except for jobs, of course. And Boris Johnson, that noted hippie you mentioned last week, he's up to it again. And so the Hummer is coming too. So we'll look at that.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on. I do want to sort of get to a couple of things that came up, I think, last week. We had a viewer in BC that was wondering about like home charging and stuff.
Oh, yeah. And the big revelation there was that I forgot that not everybody in the world has plug-ins in their parking lot that keep their ice cars alive in the wintertime.
Yeah, we have block heaters, of course, because we need them for our combustion cars. Even in Toronto, they don't have them. It doesn't get cold enough in Toronto to have block heaters, but then, in northern Ontario, they have block heaters. But so in BC, they do have issues trying to electrify the fleet because, things like apartment buildings, they don't have, they're not typically wired for electrical outlets. So I looked it up, and there is, in fact, a BC Hydro program. Like they have a vehicle incentive. You get a rebate if you buy an electric car.
How much is it?
But they also have some rebates for home charging. So if you have a standalone home, you can get up to $350 to put in an EV charger. And apartment buildings and condos are also available. They have another program up to $2,000 per station for apartment buildings or condos. So
okay. Well,
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Rod from BC, look into that. $2,000 you'd have to write. There are templates online. I do not know where to find them, but there are templates for letters to landlords and condo boards and such to help you explain things to them. And these are, well put together and thought out by people who know what they're doing. So I highly recommend that if you can.
And related to that, one thing that seems to come up frequently is the cost of electricity. And we keep saying that Canada has some of the cheapest electricity in the world. So I found the chart that charts it. It looks like Germany has the most expensive electricity in the world at 33 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's all it is?
And
33 cents? That's not bad for the most expensive in the world, considering.
yes, although that is triple what we pay here in Canada. Our average in Canada is 11 cents.
Our average in Canada. I guess you got Quebec, which is a big province geographically and population-wise, and it has lots of hydro, almost 100% hydro. BC's the same way. They have a lot of hydro.
Yeah, and I looked up BC because, again, related to what we were discussing, and for the first bunch of power for your power bill in BC, you only pay 9 cents a kilowatt hour, but after a certain amount, then you pay 13 cents. So they have a two-tiered system. It doesn't depend on time of day. It's just the amount that you use in a month. The first bid is quite cheap at 9 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's what they should do here, but they're so paranoid about ever raising power rates because it's a crown utility here where we live. The government owns the power company, which I've reconsidered that stance lately. So,
yeah, the idea is it encourages you to conserve power if you know that after a certain amount you're going to be paying more for your electricity. Do you know how much
power it is?
No.
I'd be interested to know if it would be like something that you would, as an energy conscious person in a 4-person home, would, like my power bill is about $100 a month normally before the solar panels went up. And then you get the cost of transmission, which is $25 a month just to pay for the transmission here. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Okay, I Googled it. I looked it up. You pay 8.29 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 1,350. So that is quite generous. Like I only use about 660 kilowatt hours in a month. So I would always pay the lower rate here in my house.
Wow. So that wouldn't, you were talking last week about some, very expensive homes in Regina and where we live that have high energy bills because the power company made a video on that. I guess I would encourage people like that to smarten up.
Yeah, lots of people are pretty wasteful about their electricity. So,
and in Vancouver, a higher percentage of people, because it's a very dense city, coastal city, limited by mountains, they have to have lots of condos and smaller things like that. So, you know what I was looking at today, Brian? Just before I was getting depressed, I was reading something on Twitter about somebody dissing container gardening. I was very hopeful for container gardening because in the far north of Canada, there's not a lot of population, but they have to pay a great deal of money for their stuff, and it comes dead. The vegetables, as you can imagine, trucking it all the way days and days up there to the far north. So I was excited because I saw in the news once container gardening starting to be experimented upon up there, but they were saying it's never going to be, this is like a trucking container with, LEDs inside and hydroponics and layers and layers of vegetables and things. But I saw that rooftop stuff that's going on in Quebec where they take a roof of a building, and they said that only 13 shopping malls, typical size shopping malls in Quebec, would be enough to produce all the vegetables for Quebec or in Montreal in one city. So 13 shopping malls in that city, which is the biggest city, the rooftop would just, but they can't grow everything up there. And do you know anything about that? Do they use the heat from the building to actually supplement like the going through the roof?
Yeah, I'll try and find that clip for next week, but there's a CBC documentary that covers, one of these companies that's doing that in Quebec. And part of the idea was if you it's on the top of a warehouse building, you basically build a greenhouse on the top, on the roof of this warehouse building.
Right.
The idea is that you have to pay less for heat because the building itself is sort of leaking heat up into your greenhouse.
Huh. No, I don't think that would work where we live, where it gets down to minus...
too cold.
Minus too cold. Let's not even talk about that as we approach winter once again this year. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into the show? About Vancouver?
No, that covers Vancouver, yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck to you, Rod, in Vancouver. You can get $2,000, and I think this is something we should be doing here. We're kind of the backwoods of the world, and we never do the right thing. But I've been saying this for years that we need policy at City Hall and building codes changed where well, not building codes, but building bylaws, where if you build a building, if you build an apartment building, build level 2 charging, or at least the wiring for it, so it doesn't cost a lot to add it later when you do add it.
Yeah, and either require rooftop solar or require it to be rooftop solar ready, or, require that the roofs be oriented to the south, which is something that some places do require. But
Where's that? I'd like to know about that, because I've been advocating that for years. Because when I went shopping for a house here, you couldn't find any. Our city is ass backwards. Our streets are oriented north and south, and so very few streets, very few houses actually face south. I was lucky to find one. You were lucky to find one, but there's actually a small percentage. And I noticed that when they built a new subdivision, Harbor Landing in Regina, that the developers really kind of resisted that, because they were sort of, pushed into doing that by local activists. They said, well, we can't really do that. And they went back and they changed it, and they said, no, we can't do that, at least not as much. So it's so simple, because I know my mother's house, which is an old house, heated up in the wintertime because it faced south without anything special.
Yeah, no, it's, and of course, you actually probably don't want all the panels facing south. If you have some facing east and west, then it sort of distributes the amount of power throughout the day. But in a general sense, yeah, solar should be planned for.
If you want the maximum bang for your buck, then you got to have it all south, just to maximize everything, especially in the wintertime. But it's very advantageous to have a little bit, like they say, people use the most electricity in the mornings and the evenings, maybe not in the future world that we're in post-pandemic when we work from home. But you would get up in the morning and the sun's shining in the summertime, and you're turning on your computers and your TVs and your toasters and your coffee makers, and you would get that east sun hitting the solar panels, and then you come home from work, and in an ideal world, say California, which I call an ideal world, except for the burning and all the burning and the shooting. But yeah, that would work out nicely. You wouldn't have to put as much back into the grid. You could make more of your own money. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Tesla power packs, or the Tesla sort of the home charging batteries, have gone up in price, right? Because there's been a run on them recently, and some of the power grids in the States, I've noticed, are saving a lot of money on those suckers already. They can't produce the batteries fast enough.
Yeah, the Tesla Powerwall, yeah, they had to increase the price. I think just basically because the demand was too high, yeah.
I also read sort of an analysis by a group of analysts, stock analysts, and people who follow and invest in these things, and they were saying that they really think there's going to be a battery shortage. And this is something that I've always sort of poo-pooed and said, no, well, the Chinese manufacturers always seem to be able to ramp up. They always seem to, because they have a communist government behind them, they can do what is ever necessary to make things happen quickly, and including, bringing mines online quickly. So I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about that, because the transition needs batteries, especially for the legacy automakers. Even if Tesla was fine, it still really seems like a battery shortage might be causing these things, don't you think?
Well, I mean, that's what really we learned, I think, at the Tesla Battery Day presentation, was just how many stages are involved, that they know that to meet the demand that they think that they're going to have, they got to go like right back to mining. And yeah, it's I think everybody's going to ramp up as quickly as possible, but it probably won't be fast enough.
Okay. Well, coming up later in the show, Brian Stockton, it is the much-loved lightning round. And that is where I ask you a series of questions and throw headlines at you from the week's news, and you will have to face the buzzer, and we'll try and throw a skill testing question in there as well. It'll be geographic this week, because I've not prepared properly, but that's coming up later in the show. And we are on YouTube again this week, and we're running out of time on YouTube. I only have 4 minutes left on the YouTube timer. But what do you have left? Do you have something different?
16 minutes since we started recording audio.
I know what's wrong. It's going to be a short show this week. I pressed high quality.
Uh-oh.
And because I was having trouble syncing things up, so that's why. So I
Your card's
apologize.
going to fill up?
I apologize for that. I don't think it's the card. I think it's just I looked at the manual and it actually said that it shortens the videos. My mistake. I'm sorry. Okay, Brian. What is your big story of the week, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, a couple of things here. I did want to talk about noted hippie Boris Johnson, but Shell Oil is going to cut up to 9,000 jobs due to the recent issues, shall we say, with the price of oil.
9,000 jobs. Does that mean that they're taking the resources away from oil and putting it somewhere else, or does it just mean that the oil industry is in trouble, or what are we talking about here?
I didn't know I'd have to actually know anything about this story, James.
You have to. Where's my buzzer? You know what? It pisses me off. You get a buzzer. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I don't think Shell is particularly forward-thinking in terms of their energy diversification. So they're losing money, so they're going to cut a lot of jobs.
Well, I think that's a sign of the times. So I wanted to talk about Jason Kenney really quickly because I found some interesting stats on India. Remember, he was saying that India in 2035 is not going to be able to, because people are generally poor or just trying to make their way into the middle class and claw their way in.
Yeah.
And they're going to need lots
So this is Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, Canada's oil sands capital.
Yes, very, very boosting of oil. And this is something that worries me because I don't think that they get what's happening. Of course, this show is all about what's happening in the next 10 years. India is the 5th biggest new car seller in the world right now already. Did you know that?
Yes, I did, because I think you posted it on Twitter.
Okay. So only 1% of their cars are luxury, which would follow probably the Tesla category. They're expensive, which is 10% in the U.S. But what shocked the heck out of me was that 13% of cars sold in China are luxury cars. I had this prejudice, this wrong way of thinking, this bias that said that everybody in China is just clawing their way into the middle class, and therefore that can't possibly be true. But apparently there are enough people in China to be buying luxury cars.
Yeah, there's a growing middle class, apparently, or upper middle class that can afford those cars. So yeah, but slightly different story for India. They are going to need cheaper cars there, but it's all pretty fascinating.
When Tesla first started selling there, I noticed that people said that a lot of their cars were being used to be driven around. So they actually have drivers, and they needed a certain size of car, which was the S or the X. Anyway, I want to wrap it up for YouTube. We are on your favorite podcast app, The Clean Energy Show. We hope you join us on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you find them. Look for the link in the description, and we'll see everybody on YouTube around next week for a longer show where I don't set the camera on the wrong setting. Thank you very much.